Hi, I am OSU Master Gardener Sherry Shun. Welcome to this edition of 10-Minute University. With me today is fellow Master Gardener Jane Collier. Jane and I are going to show you apples, lots of them, with common problems. With each problem, we'll talk about the likely cause and solution so you can avoid these problems next year. Jane, this apple has lots of indentations.
Sherry, this is a physiological problem called bitter pit, and its main cause is lack of calcium in the fruit. Now, this could be caused by not enough calcium in the soil, or competition from too many fruits on the tree, or maybe too many new shoots that have grown. It also could be caused if you have hot, dry weather in the summertime in July and August. That can also increase the incidence. Now, this apple will still be edible, but it will have a bitter taste to it. So when I cut this apple open, when you open the apple up, you will see that it has this corky appearance right where these indentations were. That's how you can tell that this is bitter pit.
So Jane, how do we prevent this problem from happening next year?
Well, Sherry, there are several things you can do to prevent bitter pit. One of them is to put calcium on the soil and avoid heavy pruning in the wintertime. Make sure that you use thinning cuts and not heading cuts. Make sure that you keep the soil moisture even during hot weather. Head back new shoots in the summertime and thin the fruits if needed.
Jane, I know stink bugs can suck on apples and create indentations as well. How do we tell them apart from bitter pit?
Well, Sherry, they do, both bitter pit and stink bug damage have these deep depressions, these discolored depressions on them. You can tell the difference because the stink bug will leave a sting right in the middle of the depression, where if it's bitter pit, it will not. Also, when you cut into the apple, if it is a stink bug damage, you will notice that the corkiness on the inside goes all the way to the skin. But on bitter pit, it will start a little ways away from the skin. A little bit about brown marmorated stink bugs. The stink bugs overwinter in outbuildings and they move into the orchard in the spring. What you want to do is you want to look for adults on the trees. You want to hand remove them if you see them and drop them into some soapy water. You don't want to squish them because they do stink. The insecticides are only somewhat effective, but the good news is that there is a beneficial parasitic wasp called a samurai wasp that has recently arrived in our area. It's a tiny little insect that lays an egg inside of the stink bug eggs and therefore killing the stink bugs.
This apple has a hole in the side. Is Coddling Moth the culprit?
That's right, Sherry. Coddling moth is one of the most damaging pests in the home orchard. You know you'll have coddling moth when you see that hole in the middle of the apple. Now, the newly hatched larvae will enter the apple, they will eat for a few weeks, and then they will exit through the bottom of the apple. They will pupate, and then they will have another generation after that. Now, if we cut the apple open, you can see where the larva entered the apple and then went to the core to eat. The only nice thing about this is you can cut around this damage and still the apple will be edible.
So how do we control for coddling moth?
Well, there are a few ways to reduce the populations of coddling moth, and one of them is to use a pheromone trap such as this. It has sticky things on the inside of the trap which attracts the male moth. If you choose to spray, knowing how many moths have been caught in the trap will let you know the timing of when to apply your sprays. In addition to the pheromone traps, you want to make sure that you remove any fallen fruit because the larvae continue to feed inside of these apples and then they will pupate and you'll have another generation. You also can use a product called Tanglefoot, like this. You would do is about 18 to 24 inches above the soil line, you would put a band around it and you would apply this sticky substance. That way, as the larvae climb down the tree to pupate, they will get stuck. Sherry, a sure way to protect your apples is to put a bag over them about 6 weeks after bloom. We have a couple samples here. You would take a bag, put it over your apple, and then tie the bottom. Now, the bag does not affect the fruit development, but it may have a little bit of discoloration.
Jane, I have a couple of apples in my hand. One has some brown spots and the other one have many brown spots. What's the problem here?
Sherry, this is called apple scab, and it's a fungus that overwinters on fallen apples and fallen leaves. The spring rains trigger the spores to be released into the air, and then they reinfect the fruit. If the damage is minor, they are still quite edible because this is only a surface problem. To help prevent scab, you can grow scab-resistant cultivars such as Liberty and Chehalis. Good sanitation is very important to prevent this problem, so you make sure you remove all the fallen leaves and fruits and dispose of them. You can apply a dolomite lime in the fall after the leaf drop. This will help to increase the pH and also help to reduce fungal spores in the spring. Fungicide sprays are available if the problem is severe.
Jane, I remember seeing apples with little trails all through the flesh, but I didn't see any of those bad apples this year. So what was causing that?
That is called apple maggot, and it's caused by a small, colorful little fly about the size of a housefly. You're right, we haven't seen very many apple maggot problems this year, and that's why we don't have any samples here to show. An apple maggot pupa spends the winter in the soil. The adults emerge beginning around June and continue through the summer. The adults lay eggs just under the skin of an apple, and then the eggs hatch in a few days, and then the larvae tunnel all through the fruit to feed. And those apples are not going to be edible.
Boy, that sounds nasty. How can we deal with this problem?
Well, sanitation is one of the most important things you need to do. If you find any on a tree that have apple maggots in them, make sure you remove them and destroy them, and pick up any of them that have fallen onto the ground. You can also put out early in the season apple maggot traps. And I see that you have some. These red balls are shaped like apples. You apply a sticky substance on them, and then the apple maggot fly is attracted to it. You can also protect the fruit by putting bags over each individual apple. Once again, just put the bag over the apple, tie it, and it will be safe from the flies.
That's it for this episode about problems with apple. For more gardening information and our free video and handouts, please visit the 10-Minute University Library at www.cmastergardeners.org. Happy gardening!